Hey everyone, I'm back again with another video. This time I'm slowing it right down so you can see exactly what's going on while I'm removing the front bumper and also the front radiator assembly from an Audi TT Mark II. So first we're going to be removing the headlights to gain access to the fixing bolts and nuts at the front bumper. So you can see under my toolbox is a 3.6 litre engine. With that engine I'm planning to swap it into the car here, which you can see is a 2 litre FSI motor. So I'm just continuing to loosen all of the Torx bolts that hold the headlights in. Then you'll see me continue on to remove all of the Torx bolts that fasten the front grille onto the bumper. So I find that first moving the headlight forwards is the easiest way to gain access to the plug in the back. So as you can see here, I've shifted the headlight forward a little bit before accessing the plug to remove it from the body. Alright, so that's it. Both headlights are undone and removed. Let's just put them away for storage for now. And then we can move on to beginning to unfasten the front bumper from the front radiator panel. So I find a 10mm deep socket most helpful in this situation where you're trying to remove the two nuts that hold the bumper in place. You can see that I'm using my right hand and using my fingers there to kind of block me from damaging and hitting the quarter panel with the tool. So with the bottom nut, I like to add the extension onto the tool and access it from reaching in from where the headlight used to be. You'll be able to see this a little bit better when I hit the other side. Now, in an effort to stay organized, I'm using one of these little, I guess, compartmentalized plastic boxes where I'll put nuts and bolts from separate areas of the car into one compartment. So this is where you can see a deep socket comes in very handy to be able to reach down far enough and deep enough to access that bottom nut which holds the front bumper onto the quarter panel. Now that's done, I'm just throwing away some rubbish here to have an empty rubbish bin because I need to catch some water as I undo the xenon washer hose. Next step is to unplug the fog lights from the front bumper. So this is nice and easy, especially once you've removed those headlights because you've got direct access to these plugs from above. Alright, so now that everything's been disconnected from the front bumper, you're now ready to start removing the front bumper from the body. I find that unfastening the front bumper from the very bottom corners first is most helpful, and then sort of pulling it a little bit forward from when you undid those two 10mm nuts from the threaded studs to be the next step, and then it kind of comes forward nice and slowly in an even sort of stepwise pattern. Alright, there we go. So you can see that the bumper and the grille comes off as one piece. Now, to stay organized, I do like to just replace these bumper screws back to where they belong so I don't lose them. Okay, so we're all done taking that front bumper off. Now we can move on to the next major part, and that's to remove the front radiator pack. So first up, we've got to drain the coolant, and I like to do this via the little hose that joins onto the after run pump. We've got to disconnect the bonnet release cable from this little mechanism here, which opens up, and you'll see there's a little ball end at the end of the cable, which you can just simply take out from the housing. Once that's undone, just follow the cable towards the front of the bumper, and you'll come to a few plugs here, so just disconnect all of these and lay them off to the side. So once those two are undone, we can move around to the other side of the engine where there's more electrical plugs to be disconnected. Now we've got to disconnect the intake from the front of the bumper. Unplug the MAF sensor, and then I haven't shown it here, but you want to remove that top cover. Next, we can get back under the car again to disconnect the intercooler hoses from the front radiator pack. Apologies for the bad angle here. I must have knocked my camera and it shifted backwards on my head, so you can't see exactly what I'm doing. But basically, all it is I've got a screwdriver, flathead, and shifting the little fastening clip on that intercooler link. On this side, you can see it much clearer how you've got to move that little fastening clip over to be able to disconnect the intercooler hoses. Now those are done, it's disconnecting the radiator from its hoses towards the engine. So it's the same kind of concept as the intercooler hoses where there's a clip that can be shifted across. Then what I like to do is just wiggle up and down and side to side until that port comes away from the radiator. So this port on the 2-litre FSI is a little bit tricky, and you can see that I make a little bit of a mess here, but you know, I get there in the end. So I'll just try to rescue as much coolant as I can, because you'll see here in a second that when I move the hose, a lot more comes out anyway. Alright, so we're almost there. Thanks for hanging in. So at this step, we're removing the crash bar bolts from the chassis rails. This is where I like to start checking that things have been disconnected fully from that front radiator panel. So there's a few more wires to consider. Definitely get the aircon drained and hoses disconnected. You can see that there's the wiring for the horns here that needs to be undone. There's a couple more nuts that secure the radiator front panel onto the quarter panels that need to be removed. Make sure I don't lose these little fastening nuts, so keep them somewhere safe. Okay, we're almost at the point of removing the front radiator panel. It's just now time to take off the bolts from the top of the panel that hold the bumper in place. There's also the front crash sensor here that needs to be disconnected. So I actually thought I was at the point of being able to remove the front radiator panel from the car. As you can see, I'm starting to take these final bolts off by hand, but I didn't realize that there were other bolts at the bottom of the assembly that do need to be taken off. So it's not budging, basically. So this is where I realized that there are some extra Torx bolts to remove. So let's get rid of those. Now those are undone, just the final removal of some last bolts, and then we can take the front clip off. There we go, job's done. Now here's another view from the front of the car where you can see me lifting out the front radiator panel support. So I'm just trying to find a way to leave this on the ground safely before I move it off. Once again, thanks for watching and I hope you found that super helpful.